Last night, I watched from my bedroom window as my only son, Daniel, crept into the backyard with a shovel in his hands. The clock had just struck midnight, and the moonlight cast long, nervous shadows across the grass. I saw him glance over his shoulder, then kneel down and start digging near the old oak tree. My heart pounded, but I stayed silent, hidden behind the curtains. When he finished, he wiped his brow, looked around one last time, and hurried back inside. I waited until the house was quiet, then slipped out with my own flashlight and gloves. My hands trembled as I unearthed the small box he'd buried. What I found inside made my blood run cold. In that moment, I realized everything I thought I knew about my family was about to be tested. People in this town see me as a harmless old widow, shuffling through the grocery store in my worn-out coat, smiling politely at neighbors who barely remember my name. They think I'm fragile, lost in my grief, just waiting for life to pass me by. But they have no idea who I really am or what I'm willing to do to protect what's mine. Daniel's new fiancée and her mother thought I was easy prey. They didn't know I was watching, waiting, and documenting every move. It all started when Daniel brought Vanessa home for the first time. After my husband passed, the house felt impossibly quiet. I filled my days with small routines, tending the garden, reading the paper, keeping the pantry stocked, anything to keep the silence at bay. Most people in town had no idea that before I was a widow, I was the founder and CEO of Carter Security Solutions. I built that company from nothing, working late nights and early mornings, learning every inch of the business myself. But I never flaunted my success. I preferred to let people underestimate me. It made life simpler, and sometimes safer. Daniel was my only child, the light of my life. I raised him alone after his father's illness, teaching him to be kind, to work hard, to trust his instincts. He grew into a good man, but sometimes I worried he was too trusting, too eager to see the best in people. So when he called one Sunday afternoon, his voice bubbling with excitement, I listened carefully. "Mom, I want you to meet someone," he said. "Her name's Vanessa. I think she's the one." He brought her over that evening, and she was all smiles and compliments, her laughter a little too bright, her eyes darting around the house as if she were taking inventory. She clung to Daniel's arm, but her questions were sharp. How long had I lived here? Did I manage the bills myself? Was it hard keeping up with everything alone? I answered simply, letting her think I was just a little lost, a little overwhelmed. Then Vanessa's mother, Lydia, arrived. She swept in with a cloud of expensive perfume and a smile that never reached her eyes. She complimented my quaint decor, then immediately suggested a new color for the living room walls. She corrected my pronunciation of her last name, and when Daniel wasn't looking, she gave me a look that was pure calculation. I'd seen this before. People who thought they could size me up in a glance, who mistook kindness for weakness. But this time, I decided to let them believe it. I would play the helpless widow, the woman who needed their guidance and approval. I wanted to see what they would do when they thought no one was watching. I walked into the living room in my oldest sweater, ready to play my role perfectly. Dinner that night was meant to be a celebration. But from the moment Vanessa and Lydia stepped through my door, I felt the temperature in the room drop. Vanessa handed me a bouquet of lilies, my least favorite flower, though she couldn't have known that, and gushed about how adorable my little house was. She ran her fingers along the old sideboard, the one I'd refinished myself, and smiled at Daniel. "It's so quaint, isn't it? Like something out of a storybook." Lydia followed, her heels clicking on the hardwood, her eyes scanning every corner. She pursed her lips at the faded curtains, then at the mismatched plates I'd set out for dinner. "You know, Evelyn, there's a wonderful decorator I could recommend. She's very good with older homes." Her tone was syrupy, but her gaze was sharp as glass. I smiled and thanked her, pretending not to notice the way she rearranged the silverware when she thought I wasn't looking. I asked Vanessa if she'd like some tea, and she replied, "Oh, I'll help you, don't worry." I know these things can get confusing. She glanced at Daniel, lowering her voice just enough for me to hear. "Your mom's so sweet, but she really needs help with the bills and all that. I'll take care of it." Daniel, bless him, just beamed, oblivious to the undercurrent. He was so happy, so eager for us all to get along. He didn't see the way Vanessa's eyes lingered on the family photos, or how Lydia's nose wrinkled at the casserole I'd made from scratch. Every time I fumbled with a serving spoon or asked a simple question, "Now, which one of you takes sugar again?" They exchanged glances, as if confirming their suspicions about my supposed frailty. But inside, I was cataloging every word, every look. I'd learned long ago that people reveal themselves in the smallest moments. Vanessa's "don't worry, I'll help you with the bills" was more than just a slip. It was a declaration. Lydia's constant corrections, her habit of pursing her lips in disapproval, told me she was used to being in control, to making others feel small. They had no idea, I reminded myself. Repeating the mantra that had carried me through boardrooms and battlefields alike. They saw a woman past her prime, someone to be managed and pitied. They didn't see the woman who'd negotiated million-dollar contracts, who'd built a company from the ground up, who'd survived heartbreak and betrayal and come out stronger. As the evening wore on, Vanessa and Lydia's comments grew bolder. "You really should think about updating this place," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false concern. "It must be hard to keep up with everything on your own." Lydia nodded, adding, "Perhaps it's time to consider a smaller home, something more manageable for someone your age." I nodded, feigning confusion, and thanked them for their advice. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, thinking he was offering comfort. If only he knew, that was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, their true colors emerged. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern became impossible to ignore. It started with small things. Vanessa and Lydia would exclude me from their conversations, lowering their voices just enough to make it clear I wasn't meant to hear. At a family brunch, Vanessa gushed about the modern homes her friends' parents were moving into, then turned to me with a sympathetic smile. "Have you ever thought about a retirement community, Evelyn? They have so many activities for people your age. You'd never have to worry about the house again." Lydia nodded, pursing her lips in that familiar way, as if she were already picturing me in a rocking chair, out of their way. I played along, acting as if the idea had never crossed my mind. "Oh, I suppose that could be nice," I said, letting my voice tremble just a little. "But I do love my garden." Vanessa patted my hand, her eyes shining with false concern. "Of course, but you shouldn't have to do it all alone. Daniel and I can help you look into options." At a shopping trip, Lydia steered me away from the clothes I liked, insisting on picking out age-appropriate outfits. "You want to look dignified, dear, not desperate," she said, holding up a shapeless gray sweater. Vanessa laughed, adding, "We just want you to feel comfortable, Evelyn. Maybe it's time to let us handle things for you." I smiled and nodded, all the while making mental notes. Every slight, every backhanded compliment, every time Lydia corrected my pronunciation or Vanessa offered to help with my finances, I wrote it all down in a little notebook I kept hidden in my purse. I even started recording some of our conversations on my phone, just in case. The charity event was the worst. Lydia made a show of introducing me as Daniel's mother, who's just getting used to life on her own. She corrected me in front of everyone when I mispronounced a donor's name, then whispered, "Don't worry, Evelyn. These things can be confusing." Vanessa hovered nearby, asking pointed questions about my will, my insurance, and whether I'd ever considered setting up a trust. "It's just that things can get complicated as we get older," she said, her tone dripping with concern. Daniel, caught between his fiancée and his mother, started to echo their worries. "Mom, maybe you should let Vanessa help with the bills. She's really good with numbers, and Lydia knows a lot about estate planning." I could see the doubt in his eyes, the way he looked at me as if I were suddenly fragile, incapable. But I kept my mask in place, letting them believe I was exactly what they wanted me to be. All the while, I was gathering evidence, building a case, and waiting for the moment when their arrogance would be their undoing. But what happened next crossed a line. It was a Thursday evening when I realized just how far Vanessa and Lydia were willing to go. The house was unusually quiet, Daniel out late for work, and I was in the kitchen pretending to fuss over a pot of tea. I heard their voices drifting from the den, soft at first, then sharper, more urgent. I moved closer, careful not to make a sound, and caught Vanessa's voice, low and conspiratorial. She's so out of it, she won't even notice. We just need her signature on the transfer and then it's all ours. The house, the accounts, everything. Lydia's reply was colder, more calculating. You'll have to forge it. She's too old to understand what she's signing anyway. We'll say it's for her own good. Daniel will believe whatever you tell him. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept my breathing steady. I'd suspected they were after more than just my goodwill, but hearing it confirmed was something else entirely. I pressed myself against the wall, listening as Vanessa giggled. She'll never know. By the time she figures it out, we'll be long gone. I waited until they left the room, then slipped in quietly. Vanessa's purse was on the coffee table, half-zipped. I hesitated only a moment before opening it. Inside, tucked between her wallet and a tube of lipstick, was a folded document. My hand shook as I read the title, Last Will and Testament of Evelyn Carter. The signature at the bottom was a crude imitation of my own, the ink still fresh. For a moment, I felt a wave of cold fury. I could have stormed into the next room, confronted them, called Daniel, ended it all right there. But I stopped myself. I thought of Daniel's trusting face, the way he looked at Vanessa as if she were the answer to every prayer. If I exposed them now, he might never believe me. He'd think I was jealous, paranoid, losing my grip. No, I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof so undeniable that even Daniel couldn't ignore it. I slipped the will back into Vanessa's purse, careful to leave everything as I'd found it. I returned to the kitchen, my mind racing. They were after my house, my savings, everything I'd built for Daniel's future. They saw me as an obstacle, a frail old woman standing in the way of their plans. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. That night, I lay awake, replaying their words in my mind. She'll never know. She's too old to understand. I repeated those phrases to myself, letting them burn into my memory. I could end this now, but Daniel needs to see the truth. He needs to see what they're capable of, or he'll never learn. I would let them think they were winning, let them dig their own graves with every lie and every forged document. Vanessa and Lydia grew bolder in the days that followed, their confidence swelling with each small victory. They whispered in corners, made phone calls behind closed doors, and left papers lying around as if I were too blind to notice. But I saw everything. I wrote it all down, recorded every conversation I could, and waited for the moment when their arrogance would be their undoing. I wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. I was building a case that would destroy them completely. The weeks that followed were a test of every ounce of patience and restraint I possessed. Vanessa and Lydia, emboldened by their secret plotting, began to escalate their campaign in ways that would have broken a lesser woman. I reminded myself over and over, for Daniel, I would wait. But there were moments when my resolve nearly cracked. The charity gala was the first real public test. It was an annual event, one I'd attended for years, but this time everything felt different. Lydia had insisted on handling the invitations, and when I arrived, I found myself seated at a table far from the stage, surrounded by people I barely knew. Vanessa and Lydia, meanwhile, were front and center, laughing with the event organizers and posing for photos. I tried to blend in, but Lydia made sure I couldn't. During the dinner, she stood to make a toast. "We're so grateful for all the support from our community," she began, her voice ringing out across the hall. "And of course, we must thank Evelyn Carter, who's been with us for so many years. It's not easy adjusting to life on your own at her age, but she's doing her best." The room went quiet, all eyes on me. Lydia smiled, her lips pursed in that familiar way, and added, "If anyone knows of a good retirement community, do let us know. We want Evelyn to be comfortable as she enters this next chapter." A few people chuckled awkwardly. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I forced a smile and nodded, pretending not to notice the pitying glances. Inside, I was seething. I repeated my mantra. They had no idea. I made a mental note of every face in the room, every witness to Lydia's little performance. After the gala, Vanessa cornered Daniel in the hallway. I watched from a distance as she spoke in low, urgent tones, her hand on his arm. Later that night, Daniel came to me, his expression troubled. "Mom, Vanessa's worried about you. She thinks you might need some help managing things. Maybe it's time to let someone else handle the bills, the house, all of it. She's really good with this stuff. She's got experience. I looked at my son, searching his face for the boy I'd raised. He seemed so earnest, so convinced he was doing the right thing. Maybe it's time for a change, he said softly. You've done so much for me, but you don't have to do it all alone anymore. My heart broke a little in that moment. I wanted to shake him, to make him see the truth, but I kept my voice gentle. I appreciate your concern, Daniel. Maybe you're right. Maybe I do need some help. I let my shoulders slump, let my hands tremble just a bit. Vanessa, watching from the doorway, smiled in triumph. The next day, Vanessa presented me with a stack of papers. These are just some forms to make things easier, Evelyn. Power of attorney, a few bank documents, nothing complicated. I'll walk you through it. She spoke slowly, as if I were a child, and Daniel hovered nearby, nodding encouragement. I took the pen, my hands shaking for effect, and began to sign. But instead of my real signature, I wrote a name I'd used years ago for undercover work, one that would never hold up in court. Vanessa didn't notice, too busy congratulating herself. See, Daniel? She trusts me. I told you I could handle it. Later, I slipped away to my room, my heart pounding. I recorded everything in my notebook, every word, every detail. I even took photos of the documents before Vanessa whisked them away. I knew they'd try to use them soon, and when they did, they'd find nothing but a legal dead end. The days blurred together in a haze of small humiliations and subtle betrayals. Lydia corrected me in front of guests. Vanessa dismissed my opinions on everything from investments to recipes, and Daniel grew more distant, caught in the web they'd spun. I watched him struggle, torn between loyalty to his mother and the woman he thought he loved. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was doing the right thing. Was it fair to let Daniel be hurt, even if it was the only way he'd learn? But every time I considered ending the charade, I remembered the forged will, the whispered plans, the greed in Vanessa's eyes. I reminded myself, for Daniel, I would wait. He needed to see their true nature, to understand what real love and loyalty looked like. I kept gathering evidence, documenting every move, every insult, every attempt to push me aside. I was no longer just protecting myself. I was protecting Daniel's future, even if he couldn't see it yet. The day I'd been waiting for finally arrived. They were ready to make their final move, and I was ready to spring my trap. The day before the meeting with the notary, the house felt emptier than ever. Daniel barely spoke to me at breakfast, his eyes fixed on his phone, his answers clipped and distracted. I could feel the distance between us, a chasm widened by every whisper Vanessa had poured into his ear. When he finally looked up, his face was set with a determination I hadn't seen since he was a boy. Mom, I think it's time I moved out. Vanessa and I found a place. It's for the best. You'll be in good hands with her and Lydia helping you now. I nodded, swallowing the ache in my chest. I wanted to reach across the table, to remind him of all the nights I'd stayed up with him when he was sick, all the sacrifices I'd made to give him a good life. But I just smiled, letting him believe I was resigned, defeated. If that's what you think is best, Daniel, I said softly. He squeezed my hand, but his eyes were already somewhere else. That afternoon, Vanessa and Lydia arrived, all business and bright smiles. They swept through the house, gathering documents, checking their lists, barely acknowledging me except to remind me to be ready for the notary in the morning. I overheard them in the kitchen, their voices low but giddy. She never suspected a thing, Vanessa said, her laughter sharp and cold. By this time tomorrow, it'll all be ours. She's so clueless. It's almost sad. Lydia poured herself a glass of wine, clinking it against Vanessa's. To new beginnings, and to finally getting what we deserve. I told you, all it takes is a little patience and a lot of confidence. She's too old to fight back. They toasted, their voices echoing through the house that had once been filled with warmth and laughter. I watched them from the hallway, unseen, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a cold, steady resolve. They thought they'd won. They thought I was beaten, that I'd simply hand over everything I'd built, everything I'd saved for Daniel's future. They had no idea what was coming. That night, I sat at my desk, surrounded by the evidence I'd gathered, recordings, photographs, copies of forged documents, and a detailed timeline of every scheme and insult. I called my attorney, a woman I'd mentored years ago, and confirmed that everything was in place for the morning. My legal team would be waiting, ready to step in at the right moment. I checked and rechecked every detail, my mind sharp and clear. As I prepared for bed, I allowed myself a moment of sadness for Daniel, for the innocence he was about to lose. But I knew this was the only way. He needed to see the truth with his own eyes, to understand the cost of misplaced trust. I whispered my mantra one last time before sleep. They have no idea what's about to happen. The family meeting was everything they'd planned. But it would be nothing like they expected. The morning of the meeting, the air in the house was thick with anticipation. Vanessa arrived first, dressed in a crisp suit, her eyes bright with victory. Lydia followed, her lips pursed in satisfaction, carrying a folder of documents. Daniel trailed behind, looking tired and uncertain, but determined to see things through. The notary, a polite young woman, sat up at the dining table, shuffling papers and waiting for my signature. Vanessa slid the final document across the table, her voice syrupy sweet. "Just sign here, Evelyn. This will make everything so much easier for you. We'll take care of the bills, the house, everything. You can finally relax, maybe even look into that retirement home we talked about." I looked at the pen in my hand, then at the faces around me. For a moment, I let the silence stretch, watching their confidence swell. Then, slowly, I stood and slipped off my old faded sweater, revealing the tailored blouse beneath. My voice was steady, clear, and carried a weight none of them had ever heard before. "I won't be signing anything today," I said, meeting Vanessa's eyes, "because I am Evelyn Carter, founder and former CEO of Carter Security Solutions. I built this home and everything in it from the ground up, and I'm not as helpless as you think." The door opened and my legal team entered, 3 sharp-suited professionals, each carrying a briefcase. The notary's eyes widened. Vanessa's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing without a sound. Lydia's hand trembled, the folder slipping from her grasp. I placed my credentials on the table, the company logo gleaming on the cover. For years, I've managed more than just bills. I've protected assets, negotiated contracts, and outsmarted people far more cunning than you. And I've documented every conversation, every forged document, every attempt to push me out of my own life. Daniel stared at me, shock and confusion warring on his face. Vanessa tried to recover, stammering, This isn't what it looks like." I turned to her, my voice calm. "You offered to help with the bills, Vanessa. But you never imagined I was the one who wrote them. And Lydia, you suggested a retirement home. Perhaps you should start looking for one yourself." The room was silent, the power dynamic shifting in an instant. For the first time, they saw me, not as a frail old woman, but as the force I truly was. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply reached into my folder and pressed play on my phone, letting the room fill with the sound of Vanessa's own words. "She's so out of it, she won't even notice. We just need her signature on the transfer, and then it's all ours." Lydia's voice followed, cold and unmistakable. "You'll have to forge it. She's too old to understand what she's signing anyway." Vanessa's face drained of color. Lydia's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes darting to the notary, who looked as if she wanted to disappear. I let the recording play a moment longer, then paused it and laid out a series of photographs, close-ups of the forged will, the signature a clumsy imitation of my own, the ink still fresh in the image. I slid them across the table one by one, each a nail in the coffin of their scheme. "These are copies of the documents you left in plain sight," I said, my tone even, almost gentle. "And here," I continued, producing a signed statement from the notary who'd been approached to witness the transfer, "is a testimony from a professional who was asked to participate in your little plan. She refused, of course, and reported the attempt to my attorney." Vanessa tried to speak, her voice trembling. "This is all a misunderstanding," I cut her off with a look. "You asked about my will, Vanessa. You were so concerned about my future, but it seems you were more interested in your own." Lydia's composure cracked. "You can't prove anything. This is all circumstantial." I turned to her, my eyes steady. "You corrected me in front of everyone, Lydia. You made sure I looked weak, confused, incapable. But I was documenting every word, every humiliation, every attempt to undermine me. And now, so is everyone else in this room. The notary, pale and silent, nodded in agreement. My legal team began collecting the evidence, organizing it into neat, damning piles. Vanessa and Lydia's denials grew weaker, their panic more obvious with every passing second. I looked at Daniel, who sat frozen, the truth finally dawning in his eyes. "I told you I was always watching," I said softly. "And I never forget." Of course, documentation wasn't my only preparation. The shock in the room was palpable. The notary's eyes darted from the evidence to Vanessa and Lydia, her mouth slightly open. Daniel's friends, who had come to witness what they thought would be a simple family matter, exchanged stunned glances. One of them whispered, "I can't believe they tried to scam her." The words rippled through the group, and suddenly the tide turned. People who had once fawned over Vanessa and Lydia now stepped back, their faces a mix of pity and disgust. Lydia, who had always prided herself on her social standing, looked around for support and found none. Vanessa's carefully curated image shattered in an instant, her expensive jewelry and designer bag now looking gaudy and desperate rather than impressive. I let the silence linger before I spoke again. "You know, Lydia, that charity gala where you so kindly suggested I look into retirement homes? I own that venue. In fact, I've sponsored it for years. Every invitation you sent out, every event you planned, happened because I allowed it." The realization hit her like a slap, her cheeks flushing with humiliation. Phones came out. Photos snapped, and I could already see the story spreading. Whispers, texts, and soon, social media posts. Invitations that once flowed freely to Vanessa and Lydia would dry up overnight. Their names would become a warning, not a recommendation. Daniel, his earlier doubts now replaced by shame, looked at me with new eyes. The power had shifted completely. The women who had tried to make me feel small were suddenly the smallest people in the room. But social consequences were just the beginning. The sound of sirens outside was the final punctuation to the morning's revelations. 2 uniformed officers entered, their presence commanding immediate silence. One of them addressed Vanessa and Lydia by name, their voices calm but firm. "Vanessa Whitmore, Lydia Whitmore, you are under arrest for attempted fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit theft." "You have the right to remain silent." Vanessa's bravado crumbled. She tried to protest, but the officer was already reading her rights, slipping handcuffs over her trembling wrists. Lydia, pale and shaking, looked desperately at the notary, at Daniel, at anyone who might save her, but no one moved. The officers collected the folders of evidence my legal team had prepared, nodding in approval at the thoroughness of the case. My attorney, Ms. Patel, explained to the room, "We've been working with law enforcement for weeks. Every document, every recording, every witness statement has been verified. The forged will, the fraudulent power of attorney, the attempts to manipulate Mrs. Carter's finances. There's no doubt about their intent or their guilt." As the officers led Vanessa and Lydia away, another member of my legal team handed me a list of their frozen assets. "Their accounts are locked, their properties flagged for seizure. Any attempt to transfer funds or sell assets will be blocked by court order." The finality in her voice was unmistakable. Lydia's career in event planning was over before the day was out. Vanessa's reputation, once her greatest asset, was now her greatest liability. Their names would be synonymous with betrayal and greed, not success or charm. Daniel stood off to the side, his face ashen. Ms. Patel turned to him gently. "Daniel, you're not under investigation. There's no evidence you participated in their crimes. But you will need to answer some questions, and you'll have to live with the choices you made." I watched as the women who had tried to steal my life were led out in handcuffs, their futures as empty as the promises they'd made. Justice, at last, was not just a word, but a reality. As they were led away, I turned to the person who mattered most. As the dust settled, my private investigator, Mr. Harris, stepped forward with a thick folder in hand. He cleared his throat and addressed the room, his voice steady and precise. "In the course of our investigation, we uncovered a disturbing pattern. Vanessa and Lydia have orchestrated similar schemes in 3 other towns over the past decade. Each time they targeted widows or elderly homeowners, offering help with bills and paperwork. only to forge documents and siphon away assets. He opened the folder, revealing statements from prior victims, women who had lost their homes, their savings, even their sense of security. One letter read, "I trusted Vanessa when she said she was just here to help. I never imagined she'd take everything from me." The pain in those words was unmistakable, and I felt a surge of vindication knowing their stories would finally be heard. The police took note, promising to reopen old cases and reach out to the other victims. Vanessa's earliest claim, "I'm just here to help," was now exposed as the first step in a long, calculated con. My diligence hadn't just protected my family, it had brought long overdue justice to others who had suffered in silence. But there was still one person I needed to address. When the house finally emptied and the last echoes of chaos faded, Daniel stood in the doorway, shoulders slumped, eyes red-rimmed and lost. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could see the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on him, the shame, the regret, the dawning understanding of how close he'd come to losing everything that mattered. He took a shaky breath and looked at me, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. I should have seen what they were doing, but I didn't want to believe it. I let Vanessa and Lydia turn me against you. I let them make me doubt my own mother." I crossed the room and took his hands in mine, feeling the tremor in his grip. "Daniel, you're my son. I know your heart. You wanted to believe the best in people, and that's not a weakness. But sometimes people hide who they really are behind pretty words and smiles. I needed you to see that for yourself. If I told you everything from the start, you might never have believed me. Some lessons have to be lived to be learned." He shook his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I was so blind. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just making it easier for them to hurt you. I don't know how to make it right." I brushed the hair from his forehead, just as I had when he was a little boy. "You make it right by learning from it, by remembering that character matters more than appearance, and that love isn't proven by words, but by actions. You trusted the wrong people, but you're here now. That's what matters." He pulled me into a fierce hug, holding on as if he might never let go. "I promise, Mom, I'll never let anyone come between us again. I'll be more careful. I'll listen. I'll trust you." I held him close, feeling the years of worry and heartache melt away. "We all make mistakes, Daniel. What matters is that we learn and grow. I love you, and nothing will ever change that." He nodded, wiping his eyes, a small, grateful smile breaking through the sadness. "I love you too, Mom. Thank you for protecting me, even when I didn't deserve it." We stood together in the quiet, the bond between us stronger than it had ever been. The storm had passed, and in its wake, we found forgiveness, understanding, and a new beginning. In the aftermath, justice continued to unfold. 6 months passed, and the dust finally settled. Vanessa and Lydia were both convicted on multiple counts of fraud and forgery. The judge, unmoved by their tears or excuses, handed down sentences that would keep them behind bars for years. Their assets, what little remained after the courts finished, were seized and liquidated, the proceeds distributed among their victims. Their names became a warning, whispered at dinner tables and in church pews, a lesson in greed and arrogance that no one in town would soon forget. Daniel, once so eager to please and so easily swayed, changed in ways I hadn't dared hope. He threw himself into his work, taking on new responsibilities and earning the respect of his colleagues. He started volunteering at the very charity where Lydia had once tried to humiliate me, determined to give back and rebuild his sense of purpose. He apologized to those he'd hurt with his blind trust, and over time, people forgave him. I watched him grow into a man who valued character over charm, substance over surface. As for me, life returned to a quieter, steadier rhythm. My business, which I'd quietly resumed consulting for, flourished as word spread of my ordeal and my resolve. Neighbors who once pitied me now greeted me with respect, and friends who had kept their distance returned with warmth and admiration. The story of what happened became something of a local legend. How the helpless widow outsmarted 2 seasoned con artists and protected not just her own family, but others as well. Other victims of Vanessa and Lydia's schemes received compensation, and some even found the courage to start over. The community, once divided by gossip and suspicion, came together in support and solidarity. I found myself invited to speak at gatherings, to share what I'd learned about patience, vigilance, and the quiet strength that comes from knowing your own worth. Looking back now, I realize how close I came to losing everything that mattered. Not just my home or my savings, but the trust and love of my only son. If this ordeal taught me anything, it's that patience and preparation are not weaknesses. They are the quiet strengths that carry us through life's hardest storms. I learned to trust my instincts even when others tried to make me doubt myself. Every uneasy feeling, every small red flag, was a warning I was wise to heed. I want anyone listening to remember, never let someone else define your worth. People will try to put you in a box, to tell you you're too old, too soft, too naive. But your experience, your wisdom, and your love are powerful beyond measure. Document everything, protect yourself, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. But above all, believe in your own strength even when others don't. Character always reveals itself in the end. The world may value appearances, but it's what's inside that endures. I watched my son learn that lesson the hard way, and I hope you never have to. But if you do, know that you are not alone, and you are stronger than you think. Now, when I sit with Daniel in the garden, laughter and trust restored between us, I feel a peace I haven't known in years. We are both wiser, both changed, and both grateful for a second chance. They thought I was nobody. I showed them that nobody beats a mother protecting her family.